Oysters. From Florida to Texas, they are the Gulf of Mexico's gold. For thousands of people along the coast, oysters mean jobs, money, a decent living. At least they used to. This is Bon Secour Fisheries in Alabama. Nearly every day, sack after sack of oysters is shucked, sorted, and processed.
And that's what this line over here was producing.
Chris Nelson runs the company.
This is a pretty ideal oyster. You think about the palm of your hand, and it's what's going to have a reasonably good size oyster meat in it.
Yeah. Business is better now, but not what it once was. 5 years ago, all of it, the jobs, the income, the company, nearly evaporated.
Like I said, we feel very fortunate, but it was economically as close as I want to have a near-death experience ever.
In the spring of 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. 11 workers were killed. For more than 80 days, until the well was plugged, oil gushed into the Gulf, more than 200 million gallons of it. Oil giant BP was held responsible. Beaches, marshes, and wildlife were covered in it. 80,000 square miles of commercial and recreational fishing grounds were closed for months until scientists could determine the fish, oysters, shrimp, and crabs were safe to eat. 80% of Chris Nelson's business was suddenly gone. These days, while they are on the road to recovery, Nelson is always looking over his shoulder, so to speak, because he says, you don't know what you don't know.
What I don't know is there something that we're not seeing, or some sort of effect that we wouldn't see for years afterward that, next year or the year after we're going to begin to notice it.
Nelson is far from alone in his concern. Robert Kraft is mayor of Gulf Shores, Alabama, just 30 minutes away.
I think we still don't know what extent environmental damage we may have out there. The juvenile of the species, were they affected? Is there mutations that we're going to have to deal with? Will future fish and oyster and shrimp populations and crab populations, will it be damaged? We don't know.
For now, the good times have returned. Traffic is bumper to bumper. The beaches once covered in oil are now covered with tourists lounging in the surf, building sand castles, and just relaxing with a line in the water, hoping for a bite. Tourism is the lifeblood of Gulf Shores. After the spill, that blood turned to oil. Did you believe at the time that you'd ever get out of that mess?
When it first happened, I thought our world had changed forever, and we'd never be the same. Because you look at that mass of oil on our beach, you think, how in the world are we ever going to recover this? How's our environment going to recover? How's our business going to recover? I thought we were basically doomed at that point in time. I would have never imagined we would be this far, this fast.
There are still lingering reminders of the spill, says Kraft. Just offshore, out of sight and beneath the waves, there is, says the mayor, a mat of oil mixed with sand resting on the bottom. Periodically, when the wind blows hard and the big waves roll in, so do the tar balls.
Every time we have a churned up surf, we get pieces of oil on our beach. Tar balls break off and come to the beach. We'll have that forever.
Now, after 5 years, the mayor has had time to reflect and has what you would call an interesting take on the spill. If it had to happen, he's glad it was BP, a company with very deep pockets.
I can say it now. In the heat of the battle, I wasn't willing to, but in reality, we're lucky that BP was the one that had this damage, because any smaller entity wouldn't have had the money.
And BP needed plenty of it. During the past 5 years, it has spent about $30 billion on cleanup costs, claims, settlements. The company says it spent $1.3 billion so far on 240 environmental studies. Water and sediment samples, BP says, show only minimal lingering effects. In its 5-year report, the oil giant said, quote, areas that were affected are recovering, and data BP collected and analyzed to date do not indicate a significant long-term impact to the population of any Gulf species. BP has also spent millions on advertising to help communities recover from the negative impact and to recover its own image.
I care deeply about the Gulf. I grew up in Louisiana. I went to school here. I've been with BP ever since. Today, I lead a team that sets our global safety standards. After the spill, we made two commitments: to help the Gulf recover and become a safer company. We've worked hard to honor both.
Well, BP clearly has both a public relations and a financial reason to say that everything's hunky-dory and not to worry about what's going on in the Gulf.
Raleigh Hoke is campaign director for the Gulf Restoration Network, a watchdog group based in New Orleans, Louisiana.
But we're over 5 years later, and our communities and our environment are still seeing impacts from BP's oil. Every time we go out to certain areas of coastal Louisiana, we see tar balls washing up on our shores.
More money is clearly needed and more cash is coming. BP and the 5 coastal states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida have reached a settlement over environmental and economic damages from the spill. If approved by a U.S. federal judge, over the next decade and a half, BP will pay out nearly $19 billion to the states and local governments. The spill will have cost the oil company a whopping $50 billion.
So this money really is going to be able to jumpstart restoration plans here in Louisiana. By no means is it going to solve everything, but it can get these plans moving in a real way.
Wilbert Collins and his son Tracy hope the money can somehow solve the oyster crisis. There just aren't as many as there used to be. Wilbert's face and hands are weathered. Age and years on the sun-drenched water will do that to a man. For generations, the family has harvested oysters in Louisiana, but these days, they're not seeing the babies needed to replenish the stock.
Every once in a while, you might have had a year or two that you might have had problems, but now we're going on like 3-4 years of not seeing those babies coming back,
No one is quite sure where to pin the blame. Was it hurricanes, the spill, or too much fresh water that upset the delicate balance oysters need to grow? The Collins family is getting by for now, but they worry, will the oysters ever come back?
We're just wondering for the future, you know what I mean? That's the main question now. What the future has in store for the business, the industry.
Don't know.
Don't know. If we knew, that would be the ticket.
This is Port Fourchon, Louisiana. After the spill, the entire beach from one end to the other was covered in oil. Today, you can find the occasional tar ball, but for the most part, the oil is all gone. We found a chunk the size of a pancake. It was like a flat piece of black licorice. Of course, just by looking at it, there's no way to know where it came from. But if tar mats and tar balls are the worst of the long-term impacts, Wendell Curall can live with that.
Now, did it do damage? Absolutely. The animals that were here when it happened, terrible. Are there some residuals? Probably. But all in all, this is a lot better than I had hoped for.
Curall is general manager of the levee district that takes in Port Fourchon. If it can be said, and this may be a stretch, that anything good came out of the spill, it's the nearly $7 billion Louisiana will get from the settlement with BP. Coastal wetlands the size of a football field are disappearing every hour. The marshes have been eroding away for decades, long before the oil took its toll.
We've lost over 1,900 square miles since 1930. That's the size of Delaware, okay? With this money, we're going to use it to really start up our master plan in reestablishing and at least maintaining what's left.
You need look no further than Port Fourchon for the staggering evidence of coastal erosion. Imagine this. 60 years ago, Curall says, the beach was where one of the oil rigs is now perched.
Well, that's where the beach was.
The beach was there.
The beach has eroded from 56 to today to this point. So we lost a quarter of a mile.
That's a quarter of a mile.
My dad was born in 1930. The beach was about 9/10 of a mile further out than it is today.
And today, platforms dot the horizon. During Cural's lifetime, the industry has always been here. That won't change, he says.
This port right behind us supports 92% of the drilling in the Gulf.
Cural is blunt. Without the port and the oil, the United States energy demands can't be satisfied.
Okay, look, you ever watch Naked and Afraid?
Yeah.
Okay, you cut off the oil supply for 6 months to this country and not have any oil and not produce any oil. We're naked and afraid, okay?
So, despite the spill, oil and gas is still the ticket in Louisiana. Not even the worst offshore oil disaster in U.S. history could alter that. In the shadows of the big rigs, fishermen troll the waters again. Birds look to spot a meal swimming beneath them. The tourists have returned to the Gulf beaches. Suntan oil has replaced crude oil. But it will be years, perhaps decades, before everyone here is willing to sound the all clear. Because the bottom line is, you just don't know what you don't know.